You're probably here looking for a video on how to replace your torsion springs on your garage door. As you can see, the one on the left here broke in our case. Made a giant snapping, banging sound when it did. And it's separated, so the garage door isn't opening. Keeps getting us too much weight air code on the garage door opener because it's not supported well enough. And then you can see this one's still in place, hasn't broken yet, but we've got to remove it as well because I don't want to replace just one of them. We're going to replace both. So if this is what you're here for, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Here we are up on top of a ladder. First, we're going to deal with the broken spring. What we've got to do before we do anything else is undo this set screw and this set screw. In my case, 10 millimeter wrench is going to be the perfect size. And what I'm going to do is unscrew both of these. All right, no, that is loose. This guy's totally loose. And this one, you can see it's still attached. What we've got to do here is remove this nut and bolt, and then the bottom one right here. But before we do that, we've got to take the tension off of that spring. So we'll walk over there and I'll show you how that works. Before I start unwinding the other one, let's unpackage our new springs that came from Amazon. There's one spring, there's the second spring, and there's my two bars, which is what I'm gonna need to unwind the other guy up there. Now, if you started to look for these replacements, you'll realize that there is a very, very large variety of spring widths as far as the diameter, the length of the coil from one end to the other, and then also the thickness of the coil wire. All of those things are going to give you a different amount of support for your garage doors, and you want to select something that's appropriate given the size and the weight of your garage door. I'm going to put a bunch of links in the description below with the rough recommendations for each of the most common styles of door: single car garage, 2-car garage, door 7-foot height, 8-foot height, and then insulated and non-insulated. If you know the weight of your door, that'll make it a little bit easier to select the springs. If you don't know the weight of your door, check out the links in the description, and it's probably going to get you really close to spring selection so that there's not a lot of guesswork. I'll also put in the description the spring sets that I purchased, and my case, we've got a 7-foot high door for a 2-car garage bay, and I think our door is, if I remember correctly, it's either 16 or 18 foot wide. Now let's get back to this. So what you're going to need are your 2 bars that came with your new springs, and that's what you're going to use in order to hold things in place, undo your set screws, and then take the tension off of the spring. You want to put your ladder a little bit over, either to the left or the right of the end cap. You don't want to be directly in front of this thing, because if it lets go or one of these fly out at a really high rate of speed, you don't want to get hit in the face or in the chest. Now that you're up on your ladder, what you want to do is make sure that the rods fit. There we go. Those are the correct size. You're going to have 4 different holes on the different sides of the end cap. You can see there's one here, here, right there, and right there. And more times than not, you're gonna have 2 set screws. In this case, they're right here and right there. I'm not gonna film this part because I've only got 2 hands and I need both of them, but let me describe to you what you need to do. So put this guy in here, turn it. You'll see that you've got your door. There we go. You see the door wind open? Yep, okay. So everything's working, nothing's bound up. The other thing you want to do is pull the little cord down to disengage your garage door opener from the rail, And then also unplug your garage door opener from where it's plugged in the ceiling right up there. Make sure you unplug that. So now that we know this is turning freely and nothing's bound up, next thing I want to do, where I'm going to put down the camera, I'm going to put one hand firmly on this guy. And while I'm holding this firmly, I'm going to undo one set screw and then the other one. And then gently, as I'm still holding this, I'm going to lower this bar down until it's resting on this upper brace. We're going to put a second bar here while this one's still in. And when the second bar is here in this hole, it'll be pointing out this way. Then I'll take that one, pull the tension off, pull the bottom bar off, put on the next hole, and so on and so on. And what we want to do is unwind this thing until all of the tension is off of the spring and it's loose. And then we're going to be able to undo that center keeper. Now you can see the set screws are pointing this way now. They're not on top anymore. So the set screws are not holding this onto the bar any longer. Now what we're going to do, so you can see there all the tension is on this guy here. I'm going to take my next bar, place it in here, all the way in. I'm going to lift up slightly on this to take the tension off of this guy. Then pull this rod out, and then lower this one until it's firmly against the upper support brace here. And then take this one, put it in the next hole, and continue turning over and over and swapping the bars one by one until we have all of the tension off of this end cap from the spring. Now you can see there's no longer any tension on here. So I'll be able to remove my rod. This is loose. I'm gonna make sure that the two set screws, yep, they are not tight. This moves. All right, so all of that is done. Now we're gonna go in here and there's gonna be one bolt up there and then one right down there. We're gonna undo that bolt and nut on both top and bottom, and then the left and the right springs at that point will be free. Then I'll show you how to get them off of this rod here. All right, before I undo this one and this one important thing here is that this is already centered. So we wanna make sure to put the new ones back here because as you can see, these holes are slotted. So you can install it further this way, further that way. What you wanna make sure to do, in case you forget this step, or in case yours is not centered, you wanna measure between the rod, you wanna measure between the rod and the wall at that point, at about the center point there, here, and there. And you wanna make sure that measurement is the same across the board, meaning that this rod is not pushed out further or in further in the middle compared to the two ends. Now, I know this one's centered because I did this install a long time ago. So what I'm gonna do is take a Sharpie and mark where the ends of these caps are, and then install the new ones in the same spots. I'll measure too, just to make sure, but for the sake of saving time and using this as a reference point, I'm gonna mark them anyway. Now I'm gonna undo that hardware. Now we've got the nuts and the bolts off. You should be able to easily move the springs outwards from the center. There we go. And you'll notice this bearing race, whatever it's called, is still here. You wanna make sure that stays put. This little lip here, right there, when all this stuff wiggles around as you're taking these springs off, it sometimes is fragile and it breaks. So what I'd recommend doing is don't leave it here where it's still sitting in this slot. Take it and yeah, there it is. Move it out. That way you're not risking breaking off that little lip on the inside. So next thing we're gonna do is show you how to pull the springs completely off and put the new ones on. Now we're at the end of these rods. That's the middle where the springs were. And you'll notice the pulley here with the rope coming off of it, your steel rope. And you're gonna have two set screws. There's one right here and one right there. Now, before I undo these set screws, to make sure my door stays level once I put it back together, what I wanna do is take your marker again and mark the shaft here against the pulley. Find a nice clean spot. If you don't have one, get a paper towel, and what we're gonna do is mark there and right there. That way we know exactly, you see the mark there? Let's see, there it is. That way we know exactly where the pulley was lined up in comparison to this shaft here. And we're gonna do the same on the other side. That way we have a reference point to put the pulley at the same position as it was before. And that way the rope height is gonna be at the same location so that our garage door does not end up higher or lower on one side versus the other. That's the leveling system for your garage door. If your garage door is on level, one side's higher than the other, this is probably a good time to level it when you're putting it all back together. You can turn the pulley against the rod and it'll either raise or lower one side versus the other, and you'll be able to get it a little bit more level than it was before. So now that I've got that marked, what I want to do is take the rope and pull the rope stay out. I'm going to take that, put it out of the way. Just going to tuck it in there. Now, the only thing holding this on to the rod is this pulley. I'm going to go ahead and undo these two set screws, and then I'll be able to pull the pulley inwards from there. All right, set screws are loose. We can easily pull that in. We're going to leave it right here. We're going to go take care of the other side. I went ahead and marked the pulley against the rod with my Sharpie. Going to pull the steel rope out and put it off here to the side. Let's undo these set screws. Now, before you do anything else, grab yourself a pair of vice grips, small, large, doesn't matter, as long as they function. And since this set of center caps with the pulleys is gone, this bar is going to want to roll out, and it can roll out and hurt you, fall down. So what you want to do is take a pair of vice grips, tighten it up, make sure it holds everything in place. All right, that's all loose, and we'll pull that in. So now that these pulleys are further in and they're not all the way against the edge, we should be able to, yep, there we go. We should be able to pull this rod back and forth. I'm gonna need my hands, so let me describe what I'm gonna do next. I went ahead and pulled the rod out, so I pulled it this way, pulled it up, and then over to lay it on there. Now, I'm gonna slide the pulley out, and you can see I've got my spring here already. Pulled it over from the center. So I'm gonna slide the pulley off, and then I'm gonna slide the spring completely off. I need both my hands, so I'll be right back. So here's the broken spring, and here's the two new ones. If you can see in the video, this has got a slightly larger diameter. These are 2-inch inner diameter springs that I had, and these are 1.75-inch inner diameter springs, which are the only ones I could find without waiting a week and a half for them to arrive. And you'll notice end to end, if we put this as close as we can, so the new spring is also a little bit longer. I think these were 25 and I got 27-inch springs, or maybe this is 26 and I got 27, one or the other. So the smaller diameter should, as long as the coil size, the wire size is the same as your old one, which it is, it should support the same amount of weight. Just to be safe, I got 1 inch longer. You can get whatever size you want. It'll work, but you really need to get close so that you have the right amount of support for your door and not too much support. If you got too much support, the door won't want to shut all the way. If you got too little support, it won't lift properly, and you're going to shorten the life of your garage door opener. The other thing you'll notice is these two have a red end cap, and this one is black. They'll either be black or just unpainted. Usually they're black. The red one, if you're looking at your garage door from the inside, the red one's always going to go on the left, and the one with the black cap is always going to go on the right. That's if you're inside your garage looking outwards. So if you're in your garage looking out, the red painted cap will go on the left, black painted cap will go on the right. So I'm going to take this guy, the new one, and we're going to slide it back onto that rod. Then we're going to take our pulley, which I just lodged in there for now, so it won't roll around. And we're gonna put the pulley back on, then put the rod back in that hole, and then do the same on the other side. So the spring, the side with the holes for the bars to wind it up is gonna go on the outside. And then the side with the cap that has the 2 bolt holes is gonna go towards the middle. Now let's get this on. I've got the new spring slid on there. I've got the pulley on here. I'm gonna leave the pulley loose and I'm gonna leave it inboard a little bit because we're gonna have to push this rod through. On that side, we're gonna have to push it through this way so we can get the pulley and that spring off and then put this new spring on and put the new pulley on. So let's go do that. Now we've got our new spring on the right side as well. You'll notice the black end cap is right there. So it's on the correct side. I've got my pulley back on and I've got the rod through the hole there. Next thing I want to do is get this line lined up with my mark from before. Let's see, where was it? There it is. There's my mark. So I'm going to get that lined up right there and tighten up those 2 set screws. Set screws are tightened down. I've got my cable back on and got it through the hole. It's right where it's supposed to be. Let's go do the same on the other side. We've got this pulley tightened down. Marks are lined up. We've got our cable in there in the correct spot. Now let's get to the middle and we'll work on the springs. Back to the middle. We're going to remove our vice grips. We're going to take our carrier, lift up this bar, make sure that lip is riding inside right there. It's a little bit dark. Sorry about that. Hope you can see it. So that's in place. Now we're going to bring our outside spring, our left side spring, I should say, place it on to that bearing, grab this spring, do the same. You'll notice there's only a bearing on one side. So when you've got a single spring, you've got one of these. When you got dual springs, you also have one of these. And generally it's going to be on the left side on the spring that has the red end cap. So I'm going to bring this in here. We're going to loosely rotate it to where there's room for the bolt to go through. I'm going to put a bolt and a nut through the top and the bottom. Then we'll rotate it to line it up where they were before to make sure it's centered. Finger tight the nut and the bolt on the top and the bottom, and then take measurements there, here, there, and there from the wall to the center point. Make sure that this thing's running straight across as well as it can from end to end. Got the top and the bottom nuts and bolts started, and what I'm going to do is line it up as best I can with my old marks on the top and on the bottom. You can see right there. Then get them snug, then take my measurements. If I need to adjust, I'll make some adjustments and then come back and tighten them up. Now that the center is tightened up, we want to come out to the edge of the right side spring with the black end cap. Take a Sharpie and you want to mark about, I'd say 3/8 of an inch past the end of the cap. And you'll see why here a little bit later in the video. So we're going to mark that right around there. You can eyeball it just so you know approximately where it is. Next thing I'm going to do is wind this up. It's going to be the exact opposite of what we were doing before. 1 bar at a time, 1/4 turn at a time, so on and so on. You're going to wind upwards instead of downwards. Downwards unwinds it, upwards winds it up. Be real careful. Don't stand in front of this thing. Make sure your ladder's off to the side for safety. Wind it up, and for most of these springs, you're going to be somewhere around 28 to 34 1/4 turns. So make sure you count 1, 2, 3, etc. So every time you put your next bar on the next 1/4 turn side, count that. So you want to go up, I'm going to go up 30, and then we'll test the weight on the door. And if we need to adjust and add either more or less tension, we'll do that. So I'm going to wind it up 30 1/4 turns. And by that time, it'll be right out here. And then I'm going to make a mark about another 1/8 inch out, and I'm going to pull the end cap out and then set my set screw. All right, I've got 30 turns, 30 1/4 turns on there. Now, it's hard to see because it's dark in this garage, but the end of this is past that mark, which is good. That's what we want to see. It's going to be either right on it or just barely past it. Now I'm going to make another mark just barely, probably an 1/8 of an inch out. I'm sorry, back there, I didn't mean 3/8, I meant an 1/8. 1/8 of an inch out, just barely out of where the bearing is. And what I want to do, which I'm not going to be able to do on camera, unfortunately, I'm going to take this bar, bring it out a little bit, use my other bar, and smack right here, that way, until, you'll probably take 1 or 2 good whacks, until the end of this cap is aligned with that mark. You want to pull the spring out a little bit to take a little bit of the tension off the coils to where they're not rubbing on each other. So we're going to smack that guy, pull this bar out a little bit, take the tension off the door, tap right here real hard with the other bar, get this end cap about right here, and then we'll tighten these 2 set screws. You want to tighten them finger tight first, and then probably about another half turn. You'll be able to tell when they're tight enough. And then we'll be done with this side. We'll go do the same to the other side. So I got it tapped out. You can see the mark right there. Got pretty close to lining up with it. I've got the set screws on there. Now what I'm going to do is gently pull up on this one while I put another bar in there, and then remove this bottom bar, and I should be able to take it out. Now I've got this side done as well. We also need to lubricate these springs. Put a nice thin coat of oil on there. If you don't have spring oil, you can use some straight 30 or 40 weight oil, just motor oil. We'll get to that in a minute. Before we lubricate it, we want to make sure that the tension on the springs is appropriate. If we need to take a little bit of tension out, maybe a couple quarter turns, or if we need to add more tension. How you want to do that, or at least how I do it, again, make sure your garage door opener is disconnected. Pull down on your cord so that's not attaching it to the rail and the guide that runs back and forth, so that it's free to move about with any sort of force that you put on it. Make sure your garage door is not locked. If it is, unlock it. Now you want to pull it up by hand. So as you lift up the garage door, make sure it stays in that center position. A few feet off the floor, you should be able to get it up to the center position, and it'll stay up by itself. It won't try to roll up. It won't try to roll down. It'll just stay put. Now gently put it back down. All right, we've got our tension set correctly. Now I'm gently gonna roll it up while I'm keeping an eye on this side and that side and the levelness. Make sure everything is going up level from left to right. One side's not going up quicker than the other. Gonna roll it all the way back, all the way down. I'm gonna do that 3 times. Make sure everything is sitting where it's supposed to, and I don't have more tension on one side versus the other. Then put it back down, reconnect the garage door opener mechanism to the rail. Test it with the garage door opener. Make sure everything's working. Go up and down a couple times. Excuse the messy garage, but let's go ahead and test the garage door opener now. Make sure there's no clicks or bangs or nothing's binding anywhere. All the way up and stopped where it's programmed to. Let's try to go down. Perfect, all the way shut. Now, a few tips. If your garage door opener opens the door, just fine, but then when it tries to shut the door, it stops and then comes back. That means there's too much spring tension pushing the door up, and you've got to take a couple quarter turns off the springs to reduce the tension so that the garage door opener can push it back down without the door pushing against it. Another thing, if your garage door opener has trouble opening the door, or if it opens slightly, stops, give you an error, if you have a newer one that does give you errors like ours where it says too much tension, can't lift the door, something like that, then what that means is you don't have enough tension on the springs and you need to add a couple quarter turns. If you don't have any of those issues and it closes just fine and everything is level from right to left, you're all done. In this case, we're all finished. We've got brand new springs on there. hopefully with several years of life left on them. The last thing I'm gonna do, now that everything's finished, I'm gonna get some 30 weight oil from the back garage and rub it all across both springs. But do not rub any oil in the last 1.5 and 3/4 inches on each end of the spring. You don't want oil there because it could cause slippage and create a real dangerous situation on both of them. So don't put any oil on that end, that end, that end, or that end, but do oil everything else. You don't want it dripping everywhere. You don't want it, dripping all over stuff. Just a nice little film of oil will do, and that'll be all you need. Go back and check all your hardware, make sure everything's tight, make sure your nuts and bolts there are tight. Remember, you hand tighten the set screws and then go about another 3/4 turn on the 2 here, the 2 there, the 2 on the pulley there, and the 2 on the pulley there. So check your set screws, make sure everything's good. Also go back and check the marks that you made on the pulley. Make sure they are still in the same spot against the rod and they have not slipped. If they have slipped, you need to redo some of these steps so that you can get your pulley back where it's supposed to be. Ours are lined up exactly where they were. So we're all good, we're all set. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. Again, the links I'll leave down in the description of the various spring rates that you'll be looking for to replace the torsion springs on your garage door, depending on the size and whether it's insulated or not. I'll leave the links directly to the Amazon auction, or not auctions, the Amazon listings, so that you can order yours. And if you like more content like this, make sure to subscribe. Check out some of the other videos. In the meantime, love you guys. See you next time.